Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is David Goggins. David Goggins is a retired Navy SEAL who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's also a highly accomplished ultramarathon runner. For those of you that don't know, ultramarathons are distances longer than 26 miles, and in David's case, often longer than 200 miles. For his achievements in athletics, he has been inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame. He also held a Guinness World Record for the most pull-ups completed in 24 hours. I should mention that not only was David a decorated Navy SEAL, but he also graduated from Army Ranger School. David is also a highly successful writer, having authored 2 books, the first entitled Can't Hurt Me, and the second entitled Never Finished, both of which are bestsellers. David's books cover many topics, including his autobiographical description of what can only be described as an incredibly challenging child and young adulthood. His home was abusive, his school environment was abusive, he essentially had no positive resources directed his way. And in his 20s, he found himself to be obese, that is more than 300 pounds, working a job he despised for minimal pay. And it was at that point that David began an inner dialogue that forced him to explore the demons born out of his childhood, but also the position that he found himself in as a young man. And then began the journey to navigate that dialogue and transform himself into the Navy SEAL, the ultramarathon runner, the best-selling author, and the extraordinarily positive and influential man that he is today. As some of you may know, David has done various public lectures. He's a familiar face online, because there are so many clips of him.
اللهم اجعل يوم الجمعة يوما مباركا لنا وتفريجا لهمومنا ومغفرة لكل ذنوبنا وتيسيرا لكل أمورنا وهداية لقلوبنا اللهم آمين.
Mindset that allowed him to achieve those things. But today, David really lets us under the hood. He lets us into the form of inner dialogue that he has to embrace, indeed that he has to grapple with on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times throughout the day and night, in order to impose the sort of self-discipline that he is so well known for. We also get into some of the scientific mechanisms underlying willpower, and we talk about David's current endeavors that include, for instance, his own exploration of science and medicine, for which he has become an intense scholar and practitioner. I should mention that multiple times throughout today's discussion, you will hear curse words. Now, David and I both acknowledge that cursing isn't for everybody, and that cursing itself is different than cursing at somebody. Nonetheless, we do realize that many people, parents perhaps especially, might not want to hear cursing. If you don't want to hear cursing, well then this podcast episode is probably not for you. However, if you are comfortable with cursing or if you can tolerate it, I assure you today's discussion is highly worthwhile. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research goals at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Maui Nui Venison. Maui Nui Venison is the most nutrient-dense and delicious red meat available. We've spoken before on this podcast, and there's general consensus that most people should strive to consume approximately 1 gram of protein per pound. Now, when one strives to do that, it's important to maximize the quality of that protein intake to the calorie ratio. You don't want to consume excess of calories while trying to get that 1 gram of protein in the body. Maui Nui Venison has an extremely high quality protein-to-calorie ratio, so it makes getting that 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight extremely easy. It's also delicious. Personally, I like the ground venison. I also like the venison steaks. And then for convenience, when I'm on the road, I like the jerky. The jerky is a very high protein-to-calorie ratio, so it has as much as 10 grams of protein per jerky stick. So again, making it very easy to get enough protein.
راح انساك بس احساس مو اكثر ابادر بالهجر والقاك بعدك بالقلب تكبر عندي احساس راح انساك بس إحساس مو أكثر. أبادر بالهجر والقاك بعدك بالقلب تكبر. أجرب أبدي ويثاني وأفشل من جديد. أنا صرت فارس لأحلامك وحضرتك فارس أحزاني. أجرب أبدي ويثاني وأفشل من جديد. أنا صرت فارس لأحلامك حضرتك فارس أحزاني. وأقول أنسى أرد أهواك وبنفسي الحجر أعذب. عندي إحساس راح أنساك بس إحساس مو
Aeropress is extremely easy to use and it's extremely compact. Travel, if you'd like to try Aeropress, you can go to aeropress.com/Huberman.
بأبسط الأشياء بكل شي تسوي مني ولا كأنك حبيب الروح كأنك من جبريل. عندي إحساس راح أنساك.
Again, that's aeropress.com/Huberman.
يا شخصيتي الأريدة وكافي ما أريده. لأن أدري اللي يحب خسران بس همه أدري مو بيده. معيشني ويا شخصيتي الأريدة وكافي ما أريده. لأن أدري اللي يحب خسران بس همه أدري مو بيده. أقول أيام وتعدي وارجع من جديد أبدي. تصير بخانة النسيان وارجع والقلب ضدي. أقول أيام وتعدي وارجع من جديد أبدي. تصير بخانة النسيان وارجع والقلب ضدي. مثل ما صرت وياك أتمنى ما أكبر. عندي إحساس راح أنساك بس إحساس مو أكثر.
See you everywhere, but it's not enough. You embody discipline and doing hard things. Start right off with let's go there. The bold right before we go up. We're talking about
انك طبعك ما تبي تقول لي انت جنت وتقول والله ما خنت. يسوي بيك الله بعد يسوي بيك الله بعد. خليت مكسور القلب وعيونك انت الهدوء. لك عيني لا تحلف كذب. يسوي بيك الله بعد يسوي بيك الله بعد. انك طبعك ما تبي تخون بي انت جنت وتقول والله ما خنت. شي يسوي بيك الله بعد يسوي بيك الله بعد. ضليت مكسور القلب وعيونك انت هالدرب. لك عيني لا تحلف كذب. شي يسوي بيك الله بعد يسوي بيك الله بعد. شوف نفسك هالسن شلون قدامي بجيت. كذبك اللي عن عليك اسميك العمر بس نزلت جوا الصفر شو سوي بيك الله بعد شو سوي بيك الله بعد كذب علي وكذبت لعبت بحوالي لعبت بتشوفني وين وصلت شو سوي بيك الله بعد شو سوي بيك الله بعد جاني لك عندي قدر صرت انا اسميك العمر بس نزلت جوا الصفر شو سوي بيك الله بعد شو سوي بيك الله بعد كذب علي وكذبت ولعبت بحوالي لعبت ما تشوفني وين وصلت شو سوي بيك الله بعد شو سوي بيك الله بعد انت صدق مو حبيبي انت واحد ما اعرفه جوز اقول لك منو انت احنا لا نتلاقى صدفه انت لا لا مو حبيبي انت واحد ما اعرفه جوز اقول لك منو انت احنا لا نتلاقى صدفه ليش حصلت كنت بيدك بيدك ترجع وياي خلاص انطيتك هواية فرص انتهى حبك مو نقص شو يسوي بيك الله بعد شو يسوي وصلوا لك الخبر موتتني من القهر قلبك اقسم